Welcome, Dr. Richard Hodge. I'm Frederick Tracy from FKC Health, and today I have a special guest and a man with a keen interest on values. And I'd love to hear what you have to say, Richard. Dr. Richard. So let it rip. Yeah, tell me what you've got on your mind.
And just Richard's fine, thanks, Freddie. Look, I have started a conversation on LinkedIn and through my newsletter that's about anchoring on value. And what's really driven me towards this is that I find, a lot of people noticing quite a dissonance, whether or not it's between family life and work life, that there's values not aligned, whether or not it's how they engage, at the local and community level or with their politicians, saying one thing, doing another, or then in the greater geopolitics going, there's a whole lot going on that we really don't like, but feel disempowered to be able to make any difference to it. And I guess the simplicity of my message is that each of us matter a hell of a lot more than we think, and that there's three things that we need to focus on. First, anchor on value, because we've got to know where we're centered and let that be the guiding post from which we act. Then, two, we're better able to determine what's relevant in this world, upon which we can take in on board and help frame the way in which we approach the world, or it impacts us so much that we actually change our value point. So being able to realize relevance is the second thing. And then thirdly, as they say around many train stations in England, mind the gap. Mind the gap between what you intend and what are the actual consequences, and having that mindfulness of the consequences so that maybe we can begin to engage the world as doctors do and, seeking first to do no harm. So those are the three main elements. And the first one I'm kicking off with the conversation on LinkedIn is around anchoring on value.
Right. Yeah. Values. A lot of conflicts in the world, people think are racial or political or religious, but a lot of them are values conflicts. There's a format called, a platform called Spiral Dynamics, and it talks about mnemonic structures and human emergence logistics. And it's based on a center of gravity of values, and values are based on core beliefs. So for a lot of people who've invested in the beliefs, invested in the values, they have the values, they don't understand that their perceptions are their perceptions. So they'll fight to the death for their core beliefs and their core values. But it's when you realize most of us knowingly or unknowingly either believe beliefs, or for some of us, we entertain beliefs. I'm one of the people that entertain beliefs because I know constantly my values are shifting, constantly my beliefs are shifting, because I want to have an empathetic view for being anchored and saying, what is the holistic, loving aspect for humanity and moving forward in humanity's future, rather than saying, I believe this, or this is my value, and stuff everybody else. They've got to fit in my packet of beliefs and systems. And I think to myself, if there's no detrimental direct harm of violence, if there's no greed, oppression, then some of these topics should be maturely debated and talked about civilly until a consensus is reached. But sadly, the narratives from the top down don't allow any room for those discussions. They seem to force feed us to a value system that feeds a hidden or a bigger agenda. Is that how you find it?
Certainly, I would agree with that to a large extent. That's not to say that it's, you can't find exceptions around the world. And I think that that's, and that's one of the points in what you say, and from my observation, is that when there's dichotomous debate, you're either with us or you're against us. It's either black or it's white, and that is, as soon as you sense that, then my sensitivities go up and say, look, what's the agenda behind this? Because there's a power play. The world is far more complex and nuanced, and that, you know, there is the planet's a living system, and it's all connected in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing that's black or white. You know, it's constantly changing, and you know, to go with that, shades of grey, we've got to look for that. And anyone that's not seeking shades of grey, and like, there's no such thing as right and wrong. And some will go, "Oh, you're right." Well, it's right for the moment that it's useful to you, as in terms of finding the next right step that takes you in a direction that you want to go, recognizing that you don't really understand fully the consequences of taking that step.
Sure.
But and some people can go, you know, be so risk averse and actually not move. But the encouragement is to move and see what happens, but maintain that state of awareness. And as soon as you have the sensitivity to see things happening that were unintended, then ask, was it, where was the issue? Was it about the direction I was heading in? And perhaps I need to ratchet that around another 5 degrees. Was it, you know, me acting from a belief system that is no longer useful given the changing circumstance? Or was it just something that we simply couldn't have anticipated and that we still don't know? So then who might we speak to help fill in that space that we don't know? But, you know, in terms of that, it's about valuing then our honesty, about being clear about what we know, often very little, relative to what we don't know, and then what we think, and keeping those three quite separate, I think then opens the way for a conversation about whether the next right step is indeed the best step to take.
Wow, that's quite a powerful statement of facts, because I think where we trip up is in mediation or conflict, usually a third person perspective is good, where you step outside and you look at the both points of view.
Yeah.
But most of the debates and most of the narratives are coming from an outcome agenda situation, and therefore the motivation behind that, especially with world conflicts at the moment, all the wars, they're greed wars, they're resource wars.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the silly part is all the croupiers in their office with their gambling casino croupiers, you know, wiping people off the board. The sad part is women, children, civilians are just being blown up and killed en masse in all of the conflicts, right?
Correct.
And these guys in their ivory towers are just playing chess, and they don't care about the pieces wiped off the board. They do not care, no matter how much they pretend. And I think,
yes,
for me,
and I think that saddens a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think for me, in the conversation that you're raising, is how do we consider, in a wider context, a wider bandwidth, the ongoing ramifications of our arguments or our concerns or our beliefs or our narratives or agendas? Because at the end of the day, in long-term thinking, where is the compassion left in humanity? Where is the empathy left in humanity? And where is the humanity left in humanity?
Yes.
And why I say humanity left in humanity, when I was 17 years of age, a man looked at me and he said, he was an older gentleman who was nurturing me through some stages of life. I was only 17. And he said, Freddie, let me tell you something you'll remember for the rest of your life. I said, what is it? And he said, there's only 2,500 people on this earth. The rest are livestock. And I was pretty upset when he said that.
Wow.
But it's stuck with me ever since.
Yeah.
And when I realized
that's true,
the import of how insignificant someone's life is. I'm born of Jewish descent.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken the goodness from my religious background. I'm not a Jewish practicing Jew. I've embraced every major religion on the planet, including Christianity. Now I'm an Earthian. That's it. God's one word. It's simple for me, you know.
An Earthian. I like that. That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, my theology is twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I'd like a brand new car. No, I'm kidding. I've simplified things. That my Bible's 1 or 2 pages long, and it says, don't be a blip.
Mm-hmm.
Be nice.
Yeah.
I think
And it's simple, right? And
be
just
nice.
on that, I was, brought up in the Church of England, Christian, and my wife and I were married in the Christian faith and brought our daughters up to a point. And then around about when the kids were about 7 or 8, and I was in my early 30s, I suppose, I'd had enough because I was beginning to see the institutional biases on the way in which religion is being presented as dogma, and I stepped away from it. But what I keep with me are the fundamentals of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's just simply that. If this is what you want in the world, then and love, kindness, and those sorts of things, then practice them. And dear old the tail end of the Abbey Road album, the Beatles' last album. The love you take is equal to the love you make. And I think that summarizes my philosophy in life in many respects. I couldn't have put it better myself. It's so simple. The love you take is equal to the love you make. And I think this might upset a few people who might be listening. I think it says it better than Jesus did, or at least as it was reported in the Bible.
Look, I think what people don't realize is regardless of whether Jesus turned water into wine or Mary was a virgin, I don't care about any of that.
No, I don't either.
What I notice from his compassion and his empathy, that's what infected my spirit. Like, you could reduce my whole spiritual aspect to one thing: surrender.
Yes.
And my surrender is simply to acceptance. My doctrine is probably compassion, empathy, forgiveness, and gratitude. There's probably a couple of others that trail off that. But when I feel compassion, for me, it transcends and includes love, because love has become a self-gratification.
I think
I love you means I need you and I want something from you. I want to hold you. I want to make love to you. I want to kiss you. It's all for yourself.
I think compassion
and empathy is something else. And I think to myself, for the first time in my life, I'm 71. For the first time in my life, I'm happy. I'm fulfilled. I'm content. I love what I heard Jim Carrey say. It just was music in my ears. The whole thing went off when he said, I'm resigning from the movie industry unless something comes along written in gold and I should do it. But he said, I'm out. And the lady said, you can't do that. Why? And he said, I have enough. I've done enough. I am enough.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And that was like,
yeah, I am enough. And the thing is, we don't talk enough about enough. I mentor in thought leaders, helping them make clever people commercially smart, and through the business school that is orchestrated through, there's a whole series of belts, and the idea being to earn somewhere between 500,000 and 1.5 million a year, with 2 or 3 staff, working 50 to 100 days a year. And you sort of go, yeah, okay. And I did that for 3, 4, 5 years or so. But then I got to the point where, I have enough. So I ask these people, how much is enough? And it's remarkable that many people don't know the answer. Not only don't know the answer to that, they don't know how to address the question, because it's completely out of the frame that is the dominant paradigm in the Western communities within which our governments have been created. And that's what I think then hits against the value system, right? That people, and I found it myself, bring up a loving family and that, and I've got a set of values, and then go out to work, and through my 30s stay focused and earn more money, yeah, right, and then buy a bigger house and so on, yeah, all right, all well and good. But then somewhere along the line, you notice the management styles, the engagement of other people, that self-interest outweighs what you're trying to do for your own little community, whether or not that's family or extended family. And there's this dissonance then. And then people go, well, look, there's me at home, and then there's a different me that's at work. Some people that, might go to, when I was in America, some people go to church as lay preachers on the Sunday, and then fight tooth and nail like ragged dogs in the rest of the week. And you go,
it was put to me one way, you laugh. They go to work, they go to church on Sunday to pray, and the other 6 days a week they pray on everyone else.
Well, and yeah, and we've been infected with that in Australian society. It was Gert Hofstede, and sadly he died about half a dozen years or so ago in his mid-80s. But he was a social psychologist, and he talked about, if there was one word that summarized each nation, and I won't be able to remember too many of them, but one that stuck with me for that he allocated to the United States was market. And if you think about it, yeah, absolutely, it's the market economy where they live to work. And in Australia, we sort of go, no, we work to live. But actually, we work bloody harder than many folks in America, and we've been infected with this whole market economy and the way in which our governments embrace that. Interestingly, his one word for China, someone the US might like to make as an enemy or holds as an enemy, the one word Gert used for China was family. At their center, it is family-centered as opposed to market-centered. Now, which world would you love?
Well, in my humble opinion, and I'm not coming across as an authority or I know anything, but I'm just saying from my center of gravity, America has lost the plot.
I agree.
They have totally lost the plot. And they are, as much as COVID has injured the future generations because of all those lost years of the youth, like
Yes.
young children in kindergarten taken out of daycare and out of school,
Yes.
and they've set us backwards, right?
Yes, I agree.
The America has taken the same psyche out of the whole planet through its bickering and fighting over resources. And then with all the implications of Israel, that's a resource war. And it's just unforgivable. It's a blight on humanity.
Yeah.
Now, I don't in any way endorse what Hamas did or didn't.
No, neither do I.
I'm unaware of what the truth or realities are behind that, by the way. I mean, we are always presented, we only know what we've been told, and we're always being told distorted viewpoints that suit other narratives and other agendas. But
yes.
The thing is, where any human suffering is, I'm saddened.
Yes.
I like to support people reaching their full potential. My whole background is challenging dysfunctional thinking. That's where I'm coming from. So as a life coach, as a counselor, I try to expand someone's bandwidth. So instead of playing life over one octave on the piano, perhaps they can use the whole keyboard. Instead of having a narrow viewpoint with blinkers where they're closed or arrested states of development, they have flexibility and openness to consider and ponder, like the old ancient Greece courts of discussion with Socrates and Plato and things like that, and Aristotle, where there was conversation. You saw what happened to poor Socrates. He had to take that hemlock and out he went. But the thing is, I can see all the whistleblowers of life are getting shot by the totalitarians, by the despots. All the whistleblowers saying this is not right. All those doctors that were victimized through COVID at least should have had a platform to say, something's not right, here's our evidence. It could have been disputed, it could have been argued, but they were shut down. And now it's coming out incredibly that it was a false narrative pushed by an agenda. And people are horrified they've lost loved ones, people have committed. It's whether the vaccine was mRNA and it was going to kill all these people. I'm not getting into that. But what I am getting into is the hardcore evidence the death rate went up. It could have been from social isolation, from stress, all the marriage breakups, all the businesses that were totally trashed. As a counselor for those 2 or 3 years, I was counseling 5 to 6 times more people pro bono because they'd lost their marriages, they'd lost their jobs, they'd had suicides in the family, they had unexplained deaths in the family.
Yes.
And the politicians started to dictate to us, like in 1984 and Animal Farm, you know, they just in 1984, they just dictated to us, you will do this or else, you get no say. The narrative is we are right, you are wrong, you have no say, which took away our humanist aspects, our existence. And I think, you know, from a values base, I'd like people to embrace some values I embrace,
Yes.
as long as the values are constructive. I mean, I have no religious bias against any religious person who has a good faith and a good love towards humanity. I have tons of Hindu friends. I have tons of Muslim and Islam friends. I have Jewish friends. I have Christian friends. I have all the different, you know, denominations and abominations, right? What I find is there are people who are lent in a direction to support life, their family, others. They're bright lights in the world. Wherever I see someone moving towards the light, I pour fuel and energy on it. Whenever I see negativity and destructiveness and selfishness and greed, I step away from it. I try and oppose it in a safe possible way. I've stuck my head up a few times and been shot, you know, trying to point out some inconsistencies, some unfairnesses coming from the powers that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But I think your conversation around anchoring in values, if people are unaware that their values is sort of like the navigational system in their body and mind to take them into a future that's either harmonious, beneficial, and unfolding with passion and joy, or into the depths of despair. There's a beautiful book called As a Man Thinketh. And that book was written in the late 1800s by a man by the name of James Allen. It's only about 30 pages. You can get it in PDF. It's outside copyright. Mind you, some book companies still sell it for $20. Depends if you want gold on the binding or whatever. But that's over 100 years old. And there's a little bit of language in there that's challenging. But basically, he says we're the sum total of our thoughts. And if we harbor or entertain bad thoughts, we will, from thought, speech, and the resultant activity in the physical world, is what makes us as what we are and places us where we are. So if you're harboring grovelly and debasing thoughts, you will act that out and produce that fruit. If you are harboring and entertaining positive and uplifting thoughts, you will act that out, and that's the fruit, the good fruit that you'll produce. So my attraction to talk to you when you put that out on LinkedIn, I thought, do I just start throwing text around, which is two-dimensional, and you can't get into these nuances and things like that? True. Or do we set something up like this to have a real conversation that people can start to examine their values, examine their beliefs? And why I say I entertain the beliefs, because I can only use it as a scaffolding to climb on in any one given day, because my beliefs are always contextual. So is everyone else's. They just don't know it.
That's right.
But if I harbor and hang on to a belief as a fixed thing, it can take me out. I could die. Or I could hurt someone irrevocably because my belief was so fixed and rooted because it was a core belief, but the core belief just may be wrong.
No,
so when a child comes along or another person and confronts my belief, if their belief is more real to me and more real in the general sense, I'll drop my belief in the blink of a hat and I'll shift my value.
But the point there, Fred, and I think it goes from, and you've raised a whole lot of points in what you've just said. And they're all good, and I'm not going to be able to touch on all of them, but I think that last element about being able to change is that enough awareness and acceptance that everything is contestable. But back to the point around, you know, governments like it easy and driving dichotomous debate is, well, you either do it right or the wrong way, and we're directing you. And then if you don't hold with our view, you're pretty much shunned or you know, brought up before the courts on some charge, even though, like with some whistleblowers who have told the truth and all they did was expose crimes, not commit them, except that in the exposure has been deemed a crime of others committing crimes. And you sort of go, what? there's something really quite twisted around that, and that governments, like communities, like people ourselves, need to be open to contestability. And that is, at the government level, they'll call for evidence-based policy, but at times you wonder if it's only the evidence that they want to hear, versus and then it gets into a whole different game, like with climate change. And dear old Dr. Stephen Schneider wrote a book called Science is a Contact Sport. So you've got to be prepared for the rough and tussle at that level, where the game is power and money.
Well, the whole
And
farce,
sorry.
of EVs and windmills and batteries and solar, and then you've got diesel generators charging the chargers that don't work. You've got people in the mines. I mean, really, at the end of the day, every narrative has come down to a resource war. People think there's America and China. There's only Exxon and Shell. There's only corporations worldwide. And the sad part is, the reason we're given to vote, it's an opioid for us to believe that we have some control, so we will submit.
Right.
We've never had any control or say in the agendas. The bills are pushed and passed before we even get to hear about them. They're constructed without any of our inputs, and they're all to control and manage us. And every time we're saying an election's coming up, we get a left wing, right wing, same bird. The reality is, the ruling elite or this corporate drive on the planet, they have an agenda to reduce population one way or another. So war's handy. They
Sure.
also have a fiscal way of feeding the money back to themselves, like the industrial complex. So when you look at governments and you think that you have a say or you can influence government, only on the surface.
Well,
Only on the surface. At the core of that government, there'll always be a resurgent and emergent capacity towards agenda of stabilizing these military industrial complexes, these big major corporations, these shipping routes. It's all, we are fodder, cannon fodder, we are livestock, we are resource. Every human being is simply just an ATM.
Well, I want people to feel a little bit more than that. I actually want them. I actually want them to come back, because as an individual, I could hear that and go, what's the bloody point? I might as well just do what the hell I like on this world, And if it's a long life, all well and good. If it ain't, well, I've rolled my dice and let it be so. But yet, if that doesn't suit I can only speak for me. I don't want to, I want to leave this world feeling that I've done something that my children and their children and our grandson, our eldest grandson's 23 already, can point to and say, well, he didn't just let it drift by silently, or that he did do something towards helping us change our way of thinking. He did do something to help us realize that we matter more than we think. And those are the sorts of things where we may not know the answers here today, but I do believe that if we anchor on value, and I'll come back to what I mean by value, because it's not just values that shape behavior. That's part of it. But if we anchor on there, and we have the open mind of a scientist, of skepticism and contestability, that even our value set is open to contestability, that we can move and shift our beliefs as science moves and shifts its laws, when evidence is there to suggest that actually what we've believed for so many years is now wrong and can be replaced by this new way of looking at the world. Well, then that's a useful way of being able to move forward and engage with the complex world, rather than manage it or be managed by it. And so if I may, I'd just like to say a little bit more about value. When I talk about value, I really want people to think about, yes, how do we conceive value? How do we contribute value? And how do we count value? So and these are of our making. And how we count value needs to align, because if at the end of the day we find we're only counting dollars, we're only measuring our success by material things that can be attributed to a dollar sign, then everything that we say above is mere words, and we've created our own dissonance. And I think that by and large, our American-driven Western society is in that hole right now. So from the conception of value, I'm only going to, in my LinkedIn series, going to point to 6 of them. I've started with honesty, because if you don't start with the truth, what is there? At least the truth as you are aware of it now. Then transparency, just like in a law court, not just the truth, but the whole truth. Thanks. Don't just tell me what you think I want to hear or what you want me to hear without. Then mindfulness, and mindfulness about that. Well, sometimes these truths can even hurt people. So be mindful about how you engage with people and come at it with kindness, but also being mindful of the world as a whole. We are one planet. Stand on the moon imagine yourself standing on the moon for a moment and looking at that little blue dot. That's all we've got. That's the only place we know of where life exists. So let's not kill it, right? So being mindful, and then you can zoom in on that. So being mindful, then you realize that there's a hell of a lot in the world that we can't affect. So if we want to affect it, we've got to collaborate with people. And then if we're going to collaborate, then we've got to be accountable for our share, and not accountable in the sense of, again, going back to the Western corporate, finding someone to blame, so now we know whose feet to hold to the fire, but accountable to yourself. Am I doing what I said I would do? Then, knowing that it's a big, complex world, stuff will go wrong. If you're going to live transparency and honesty, you're going to go, sorry, I stuffed up this, or this popped up and didn't know that was going to happen. So when people do that, you need to treat them with respect. And that's the 6th one. So, and perhaps for honesty to begin, maybe respect is the starting point, not the end point. And so there's a codependency amongst that set of construction of how I conceive of value that drives behavior and the way in which I endeavor to engage in the world. And I stuff up from time to time. Yeah, so that's the conception. Then I won't spend as much time on contribution, but simply how do you contribute to the planet? How do you contribute to society? And how do you contribute to prosperity? And that ain't just about your own personal wealth, right? It's making things prosperous for the whole 3. And then how you count. Well, we've covered a lot up here. Is the way you're counting covering all of that, or are you just reducing it to a dollar sign? Because if it's the dollar sign, you know, people will see your actions louder than your words.
I absolutely concur with that whole soundbite, which was huge. I concur and empathize and embrace what you said and support it, because for me, I figured out some time ago, I'd say probably as much as 30 or 40 years ago, I figured out my mission. My mission on this planet is to raise consciousness and awareness in myself and others.
Beautiful.
Because I realized at that time, no matter what I could do personally from an intellectual point of view, I was limited. I'm not the brightest head in the shed. I'm just an ordinary average person. But when I say raise consciousness in myself and others, I can do that. It may not be grandiose. It may be step by step or incremental, but that's my contribution to raise consciousness and awareness that we are one. There's no separation between self and other. No. And most of our resource arguments or our selfish arguments or our values is because we're operating from a carnal set of gratification of our lower carnal wants, greeds, desires, and prejudices. And usually in the political realm, we usually vote the people in that have made all the promises they're going to gratify all that crap. So that's where the problem comes from. It comes from us and we blame them. Yeah. Right? But they're only giving us that on the surface. They've still got a separate agenda again. And I think the hope for humanity is social media has brought an opportunity for this sort of thing to happen, for a wider consensus, but they're shutting that down as much as they can. Like they banned TikTok simply because they don't want the political exposure of what's going on that's not fair. They want us living in the dark to control us. So at the end of the day, when I started to oppose certain things, I got wrist slaps everywhere from Facebook, from LinkedIn, from Twitter. They fiddled around with the algorithms, and half my posts, I put something stupid like me with a hat on down the beach, patting a dog, going to get 1 million views and likes, and 200 people liked it. I put something profound on there, one, maybe two, because I privately messaged it to a friend who decided to like it and share it as a friend. So anything that raises consciousness. And I said, why would they want me to stop raising consciousness? Why? He said the powers that shouldn't be have put all the chemtrails into the sky, all the additives into the food, all the pollutants into the medications, all the pollutants into the educational system, the environmental systems, the social. See, what it is I want the emotional intelligence, the social intelligence, the awareness and compassion of a spiritual revolution, a emotional revolution, a compassion revolution, an association of brotherhood and love of each other and humanity revolution. So the movement in humanity is realizing the governments are not our friends. They don't have our best interests in heart. They placate us with a lot of facades. I mean, that stupid centre they put out in Geelong, like cost them $1 billion or something. They got the air conditioners going all day. It was a big giant prison. No one's in there. It's been billions of dollars to run, and all these what are the quarantine farms and all the rest of it. I mean, they're trying to batch process us like Ingham chickens. Everyone's got to get a vaccine or else you will never work in this town again. We'll destroy your life. We'll seize your assets. Well, they can seize all my freaking assets. I don't have any. They'll probably be doing a favor if they take my stuff. And as far as the junk in here, like the TV, and I don't watch that TV. I hardly ever sit in that lounge chair. I mean, I'm done with the material life. I'm 71. I've had everything that opens and shuts. What I want to see is a hope and a future for the future generations. I invest in the youth so passionately. There's a guy I mentored for about 10 years, even to this day, but I consider him my mentor, even though he's only 34 or something. But Rick, he runs Manor Youth Project. And he tried so many times, he kept going back into the governmental systems. And all they were doing is handing out lollies, so to speak, and letting people exist the way they were. Their paradigms, their consciousnesses were never challenged, whereas he's created his own IP, his own narrative based on Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, so they'll have a moral compass, so they'll have an ikigai, a sense of purpose. So he would be mentoring and coaching these youth. And he said, if the village can't feed a youth or something, they'll burn it down, right? So he's suffered himself as a youth where there's been no real infrastructure. Then I look at people with mental and really environmental conditions of sufferance, where the only hope they can do is go and pay $300 for a practitioner. Everybody goes off for some sort of healing. They're up for $200 or $300. When I work with somebody, sometimes I can spend 5 solid days with that person and not charge them anything, because who's going to do the healing? Is it a 5-minute affair that I'm some sort of wizard? No, I'm not. I've painstakingly got to go and find the missing bricks in the foundation, pull the old fence down, put a firm foundation in, lay the first layer of bricks, the second layer of bricks, and then hopefully they can build on that. I found that it's a slow healing and a permanent healing. But who's got the resources? One to dispense it and one to give it. Who's got the resources to show that love?
It's only through the grace of people such as yourselves that sort of support will exist, and I think that teachers, at least the enlightened teachers, and many of them do just that for their students. End up spending their own money to buy supplies because government money has gone too much to rich schools to build their pools and their gymnasiums,
armaments,
and to armaments. But in the public schools, I was on an education point, not a weapons point, because I think getting the fundamentals back into public education is absolutely crucial, and so that it's the best place. In fact, it's almost the only place in which to start to raise the consciousness of these young humans, to build them with a firm foundation so that when they leave school, they can enter society. In fact, well before they leave school, they have entered society as fully functioning adults. Right.
Hence,
And then we need the corporate world not to kill the love of learning that the
oh
school
yeah,
system has built for them.
singing my
And
song,
ah,
singing my
well,
song. Yeah,
and there's a lot of work still to be done there.
yeah.
And anyway,
One of our dreams in Mana Youth Project is to provide rites of passage. So these kids, instead of going out on their schoolies, you know, when they graduate and getting drunk and falling off balconies and doing daredevil tricks, they can actually go through some controlled expansion of maturity so that by the time they're 15 or 16, they're a responsible leader in their community and
sure,
they can bring wisdom to other kids. This is not being taught in any of the institutions. Mana Youth Project is the only place I know that dispensates hope for the future that way. And I
right,
think this conversation is powerful, Richard. And what I'm thinking, so that people don't get overwhelmed, if you're up for it, we can maybe do a couple of these and
sure,
spread them out so that we can see what we can put into each one
yeah,
and build on your conversation. Because I think what you've introduced is a topic that is not easy to get out in one hit. And it's not
impossible,
easy.
I think.
Yeah, and it's also not easily to entirely encapsulate. But I hope through what we're speaking about today is that we've stimulated some thinking,
Right.
stimulated some hope, have people rub their chins and say, yeah, I realize lobbying, going to governments, going to rallies and protests, it's not working. What
Well,
can I do?
but nonetheless, that's not to say that those aren't valid activities,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I believe that some of that is required, because fundamentally politicians are not leaders, they're followers. And if there's enough of the population heading in a particular direction, and they know that people will vote and that they will lose votes, and there's enough votes lost, it does get attention.
Well,
But anyway, perhaps before we finish, may
yeah.
I just let anyone who's intrigued,
Yep.
why has he got dragonflies on his wall?
Who, me? Oh,
Me.
right. You've got dragonflies. Right.
Well, I use them as I've taken them on as a totem, and because they are symbols for transformation, so for the change that we need, for self-realization, and for new beginnings. And I think that it begins with self-realization, and that's where I start with anchoring on value. And that of the 7 elements, 3, the head, the body, the thorax, and 4 wings, the 7 elements in how I make this accessible to other people. And I'd be delighted as we go to expound on that further, because those dear creatures have been on the planet in some form for over 300 million years. Isn't that brilliant, right?
We've only been here for a couple 100,000 as humans.
Exactly. And they are the #1 predator in the world. And then you might say, no, what about the lion, tigers, whatever else? Their hit rate of success when they do everything in flight is over 90%. The next best is the African wild dog, the hyena, and only because they work in packs. All right. So there's, I think, a lot to be gained from understanding and just having as a metaphor the dragonfly for how we need to be agile at wing and being able to strike successfully 90% of the time.
Awesome. Wow, there's quite a bit for you all out there to work through and think about. And certainly Richard and I will take some of this offline and talk about the future, because my passion to raise consciousness and awareness our hope is in the youth.
Yes,
I mean, not that I disregard mature or older people, but some people are set in their own ways and they're not flexible
Hmm.
due to the damage that they've endured, trauma, things like
That's
that, because
right.
trauma is part of the human condition.
Yes.
But the optimism, I'm an eternal optimist because pessimists are usually always right. They say, I think today's going to be shitty. And guess what? It is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, they're right. You know, they win every time, hands down. I can't compete with pessimists. Optimists are only right maybe 50, 51%, but they're the ones that build all the bridges and invent things and create good stuff. I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right. So I hope there's some optimism in here that people are thinking about the problems we have in the world.
Indeed.
Like you, I haven't resigned anything to being defeated by it. I vehemently oppose oppression and destruction and selfishness.
Yes.
I promote love, light, and liberty. That's my mission statement, to pursue love, light, and liberty, and to help raise consciousness and awareness in myself and others. So there you have it, folks, from Dr. Richard Hodge. By the way, what's your doctorate in, your PhD?
Systems engineering, but how you apply systems approaches to strategy and execution in complex enterprises.
When I did my NLP training, systems theory and strategies came into play to see we're dealing with complex systems when we're looking at behavioral change. And when we talk about transformation instead of change, I'm interested in second order change, not first order change.
Well,
First order change.
I'm interested in both.
Well, first order change is shifting chairs on the Titanic. Usually it's still going to sink. And I know that
first order change will give you direction. Second order change will know whether or not you're doing, the right thing at the right in the moment, right?
Getting out of the loop.
So one is change over time,
yeah.
and knowing that you're doing the right thing at the time is something else. There's the second order and the first. So I think we've got to be able to hold both, and
Sure.
It's not dichotomous.
Well, I guess self-fulfilling loops of no change but appearing as change is one thing that I found people are stuck. They're stuck in loops, psychological
Yes.
loops, belief loops, values loops. And these loops, one of my favorite questions, it's the simplest question on earth. When they tell me what they believe and what they value and how they embrace it, I just ask them one simple question. So you believe that, do you? Yes. That's your value, yes. How's that working out for you so far? And they'll cock their head and they'll look at me like Scooby-Doo and they go, not too good. And I say, well, wouldn't it be a bit of time to look at the systemic homeostasis that holds you in those behavior patterns, hold you in those consistent circumstances of woe or pressure? If we alter the system, then you'll arrive in a different place. For instance, if you start here and walk around the planet, you'll end up back here. But if I nudge you 1 millimeter, you're going to end up a couple of 100 kilometers away from where you started. So the shifts don't have to be grandiose or some blinding flash of the obvious. These subtle shifts towards consciousness, towards awareness, towards the solutions that we look for, if humanity would wake up more, and I think there's a revolution of consciousness coming, and I'm not a new age flake thinking, the stars and the moon did it and all the rest of it. I think there's been enough pain and suffering in this life for people to want to wake up.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for your precious time, Richard. It's been awesome, and I look forward to us doing it again. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell because there's more of this stuff to come, and there's more of this stuff on our channel. Thank you.